the thing for me, the learning thing for me was when I got back and he wanted to give me $1,000 bonus. And he was so excited. He brought me into his office. He's like, here's $1,000 bonus, like on your check for everything you're doing for the company. I said, you know what? I said, I don't want $1,000 bonus. I said, you can keep the $1,000 bonus. I said, to me, I said, and which $1,000 was big money for me. I said, to me, I'm bought into the company 100%. To me, what I want for my bonus is when you're starting to expand and use that $10 million to grow, when there's roles to be filled, I want you to think of me. I'm your guy.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for dropping into another episode of the Path to Freedom podcast. Today, I'm joined by a very good friend of mine, Raffi Iskenderian. We've been talking about doing this for a while, Raffi, and I've been really looking forward to it. So I appreciate you making time to be here.
Of course. Thank you.
So Raffi and I know each other through ShelfGenie. Those that have listened to the podcast know, my wife and I are ShelfGenie franchisees. Raffi and his business partner, Jeff, have been ShelfGenie franchisees for probably 4 or 5 years longer than Kelly and I have been. So that's how we met, and we've become, good friends. Kelly and I personally have learned a ton from Jeff and Raffi over the years. And always enjoy seeing them when we get together at conferences and events. But, in addition to all of that, Jeff and Raffi are involved in some other businesses outside of ShelfGenie. And Raffi in particularly has a very interesting story and a lot of just, I think, good life and business advice to share with anyone out there that's thinking about business ownership or, already in business for themselves, but just, looking to continue to grow and level up. So that's why I wanted to have Raffi come on the podcast. So, with that, Raffi, maybe give us a quick little introduction and, maybe start by just kind of sharing, in addition to ShelfGenie, what other businesses you're currently involved in as an owner.
Sure. Thank you. Again, thanks for the opportunity to be on this podcast with you. So yes, like Wes, you said, I've known you for quite a bit now, and your wife, Kelly, and we've had good times with ShelfGenie. Jeff and I, my partner Jeff and I currently own multiple home improvement businesses. It all started with ShelfGenie, and then it morphed into a cabinet refinishing business, and then it went into another ShelfGenie territory in Philadelphia. Currently, we're in Boston, Massachusetts area. And then we started an independent closet business, which is our own non-franchise. We're a dealer of a manufacturer. And then after that, we brought on a carpet and flooring business, which is a little different type of business because it has an actual retail location for us.
Yeah.
We sold our refinishing business. We sold our Philadelphia ShelfGenie business, and our current core businesses are ShelfGenie in Massachusetts, where we cover almost all of Massachusetts, southern New Hampshire. We have our New England Closets business, where we cover similar territory, and we have a carpet and flooring business, which is located out of Sudbury, Massachusetts, and it covers, a little smaller geographical diameter, but still covers quite a bit of territory.
So I think the first question most people would probably have is, what do you do with all your spare time? Since you're clearly not busy building businesses at all. No, but it's interesting. And I've always been fascinated with what you and Jeff, have done since we originally met you. Because I think when Kelly and I first met you, you were in the cabinet refacing business in addition to ShelfGenie. You owned the 2 markets for ShelfGenie. You had Boston, you had Philadelphia, and I think you had your closet business already as well.
2015, 16 timeframe.
Yeah, so I would have probably met you in like 2017.
Yeah, so we're right into early.
Yeah. And so like, I can remember, and, we weren't even franchisees at that point. I went to work for ShelfGenie, and that's when we originally met.
Yeah.
And I just remember being fascinated. And I'd seen, some other examples similar to that where, people got into a business in many cases through a franchise. And we'll, I think, probably talk more later about why franchise can sometimes be a really good starting point, but doesn't necessarily have to be the end all be all or the only, option for someone. But and then they continue to grow, not always through just expanding with that same franchise. They're adding on complementary businesses, and you guys have clearly done that. And I just remember being kind of intrigued by that. So I think there's a lot of interesting things to talk about and kind of unpack along those lines. But before we do that, tell us a little bit of your backstory and how you even got to the point of, being in the home improvement, home services industries as a small business owner.
All right, thank you. I'll do that. I won't bore you to death, so I'll keep it pretty short. So,
Man, go. It's not boring. It's not
so
boring at
I'm
all.
an immigrant. I'm not born in the U.S. I was born and raised in Beirut, Lebanon, but I'm 100% Armenian descent. So, Armenian, born and raised in another foreign country, which was Beirut, Lebanon back then. I spent my first 13 years there as a teenager, up until a teenager, and in a pretty devastating civil war, where almost complete chaos, very dangerous lifestyle type of thing. And we were fortunate enough in 1986 to be able to get out of there when I was 12 and a half or something like that, get out of there and come to the U.S. We had family in Belmont, Massachusetts. My grandfather passed away, and that's how we got our visas, and we were able to come here. When we got here, my father stayed in Lebanon to clear up some business, whatever he had going on there. And when he came to the U.S., unfortunately, a couple months later, he passed away. So we were, it's me and two younger brothers and my mom, kind of a little bit lost of not knowing what the future holds for us when we were young. And a lot of, not knowing where to go, to move to California, to move back to Lebanon, to stay in Massachusetts. But we kind of hunkered down here because we had my mom's family, her brothers were here in this area.
How long had they been in the area?
Not much longer. They were all from either Lebanon or somewhere around there, and they had migrated here maybe a few years before, and it all happened because my uncle went to school here. When he went to school here, and he just kind of for whatever reason picked Boston. And Boston has a pretty decent Armenian community, especially back then. So Armenians are very tight in their community. So wherever there's Armenians, there's going to be people moving to those areas.
Which I imagine is helpful, but still, to especially be 12, 13 years old, just moved to another country, a handful of people, but virtually nobody. And then your father passes away shortly after all of that. I mean, I can't imagine. I think that's tough for anyone.
It was definitely tough. It was challenging, but at the same time, if you think about what we grew up in, chaos and destruction was kind of our norm, right? Now, I'm not saying we welcomed it, but it was you kind of knew how to deal with stuff like that because you've seen things like that happen to people that you knew or other family members, and you kind of knew that you kind of know how to handle something like that. Now, I'm not saying we came out of it squeaky clean and everything,
right, or you enjoyed any of it, but no, I mean, that's a good point. I forget what it was I was listening to the other day, but they mentioned a quote where it's like, the worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you, right? So like, if you've been through some real shit in your life, you get a flat tire, you're like, oh, I guess I gotta change my tire, right? But if you've never really been through anything, you get a flat tire, it's like the end of the world. It's all about perspective. And I think going through adversity is never fun when you're doing it. But it definitely can leave some lasting lessons and help prepare you.
and once it builds a foundation that you can't really pinpoint why, some people say, hey, like when you say, where's your time go? Or is your, how you come up with time? It's just, it's part of your personality that gets developed that you can't really pinpoint and say, yes, I have that trait. It's just ingrained in you, and it makes you do things or have the drive to do things, or because other people have not gone through that, or they don't know how to act or make decisions on the fly, or do things. And that's, I look at that as an opportunity, right? Opportunity and an advantage that I may have over some people, because I can think quicker on my feet, maybe because I've been through a lot of different situations that are a lot more difficult and are a lot more costly, not necessarily financially.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I would imagine it just gives you good perspective that a lot of people don't have when, you've literally been in life and death situations, as a kid. Something bad happens in business. It's like, okay, this isn't ideal, but like, let's move quick. Let's move decisively. Let's not let this rattle us, and shake us off track. These things happen, and it could be far worse.
Yep, and at the same time, we'll come back to that at some point in this cast. But having a good sounding board, like a chef, my partner, has been instrumental to our success, because that passion that I may bring to something, sometimes if it's not controlled, it could kind of go overboard, and you make rash decisions that may end up hurting the business one way or another. But I think having
that
Jeff,
makes sense.
Who's very even keeled, and Jeff, he's very, very even keeled, very calculated, very let's take the data, let's think about it, then make a decision on how are we going to act. Helps out a lot.
Yeah, no doubt. You and Jeff complement each other very well in that regard. So tell us a little bit more about some of the early days adjusting, because I mean, I think you told me you really didn't even speak English when you first got to the US.
I spoke multiple languages. I had just started learning English in Lebanon. I was in 6th grade, but when I came here, I mean, it was halfway 6th grade that I came here, or right at the end of 6th grade. So I had a very, very bad accent. I still have an accent, but I had a very bad accent. I didn't really know a lot of vocabulary. It's funny because on my SATs in high school, I would answer the first 3 in the English part. I did very well in the math, but in the English part, I would answer the first 3 that I recognize and guess on them, and then leave 17 blank, because back then you would get penalized for if you got wrong answers. So that was my strategy. I would leave a lot of blanks on my SAT. Anyway,
work smart, not hard.
Yeah. Childhood here, high school, middle school, high school was pretty tough. Trying to adjust into the culture. I came from Lebanon, the Middle East. There was a lot of back then it was Desert Storm, and Iraq War was starting to happen. So we were not really favored by the local kids, but we got through it. I went to Boston College. I applied to Boston College, and I got into Boston College, and I wanted to go there. My plan was to become an eye doctor, an ophthalmologist, because my family really thought that I should be an eye doctor, because my father in Lebanon used to make prosthetic eyes. And in the war,
no way.
In the war, he had very good business, because people would get their eyes blown out because of the shrapnel and the war. So I was fascinated by I was always fascinated by his skill and how beautiful he would make, how he would do it. So, that was the path that I was going to go, right? So in a lot of our families in Lebanon, usually the kids follow, like one of the kids will take over the dad's business.
Right.
So,
yep.
Anyway, got into Boston College, went there. Junior year, I just kind of started getting cold feet about medical school. I did very well on the tests, and I had interviews and everything like that to medical school. But then I decided that I'm not going to go to medical school. So
is that just kind of a gut feeling that you followed?
Yeah, it was gut. I just didn't have it. I know I really followed it, I'm sure I would have done well at it. You know what I mean? Yeah. I would have been okay. But I just having some friends of family who were in the medicine and having, shadowing them a little bit. And a lot of them said, if this is not your 100% passion, then don't go after it, because medicine is not the same as it was before. And back then, you're talking 90s, and just imagine how it is now with the insurances, with the control, with HMOs and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
unless you become like a really, really, profound specialists, then and then at the same time, there was also a big financial strain on us, right? Because we didn't come from our financial situation was not great. So for me to think that I'm not going to be able to make a living for another 8 years after college, not being able to help out my family and my mom, that was pretty tough.
Plus, just how much it costs to go through all that
Correct.
schooling. I mean, we have friends that, probably weren't in that tight of a financial situation going into school. And I mean, they will, one's an ER surgeon and the other one's, finishing her residency and will be like a pediatric oncologist, right? So fairly specialized. They were telling us, we saw them over Christmas. They're both probably early, 30s. They're going to be in their late 50s before their school is paid off.
Out of control.
Out of control. And there's a whole nother, wormhole we could go down there with. I've been reading this book, The Almanac of Naval Ravikant. If you're not familiar with this guy, Naval Ravikant, check him out. But, he talks in this, I'll text you a link to the book, but he talks in this, about the whole book. The subtitle is A Guide to Wealth and Happiness. And, he makes the claim that in order to truly be happy and live a fulfilled life, you have to build wealth. And he's not talking about you have to make a lot of money so you can, buy the fancy car and buy the Rolex and keep up with the Joneses. He's talking about, you have to build enough wealth so that you can spend time doing what you want to do, working on the things you want to work on that interest you, and being with the people you want to be with when you want to be with them, instead of working just to make the money that you need to live, whether that's you're working to make $1 million a year or whatever. So that's kind of his whole philosophy. And in that, he talks a lot about the fact that to truly build wealth and ever get to a place of financial freedom, you need equity, you need ownership. You're not going to do it working for someone or even working for yourself, like a doctor or a lawyer, where you may get paid very, very well for your time, but you're still trading your time for money. So kind of a tangent there, but maybe brings us a little bit full circle, where the path you ended up taking, a more entrepreneurial path compared to, being an eye doctor. And sure, you could have, maybe started your own practice, if you'd gone the medical path, but if you buy into that kind of premise that, wealth is going to help you lead a more happy and fulfilled life, and to achieve the wealth, ownership is key to that. That's more of the path that you ended up going down.
I mean, I think that's a very important point. And I think control is another one. When you have equity, when you're owner, you have more control. And if you apply that control in the right way, then I think the dividends can be pretty big.
Yes.
But at the same time, if you don't apply it in the right way, it can go the other way a lot quicker. So
more downside, sure.
So I mean, so when I got out of college at Boston College, I was kind of lost because I was going to be in business, and I would, I look back at myself maybe 30 years ago, and I'm like, at interviews, I'm like, what do you want to do? I want to be business. Like, when I went to interviews, I wanted to get into financial services, Fidelity, or some of these other places, or get into pharmaceutical sales, because I knew that those two industries were pretty, from the research that I did, because I didn't take any business classes in undergrad, because I couldn't take business classes when I decided to not pursue medicine. So I was still stuck in my pre-med path. And the only thing I could do is take psychology as a minor. So I took psychology as a minor just to get a little more exposure outside of the pure, biologies and the biologies and the chemistries and physiologies. So anyway, I came out, I was kind of bouncing around, not knowing what to do. I landed a job making very, very little money as a leasing customer service. And this company did leased out credit card machines, vending machines to multiple different businesses.
Yeah, okay.
And I knew somebody who worked there because I had to get a job. So I got a job. Like, I was very aggravated that the average salary of a Boston College graduate was $36,600 back then in 1996, and I was making $19,200 as my first salary, and I was pretty not happy about that. But on the flip side, I was working nights at a bar, restaurant bar in Fenway Park, near Fenway Park, and I was making pretty good money back then for somebody out of college.
I'd work at a bar at Fenway for free.
Well, you probably want to work for it without the free because it's pretty lucrative, especially back then too.
Yeah.
So anyway, that, and then the other thing, this is where the entrepreneurial comes in. For me, at least, when I was a junior at Boston College, I was a commuter. I did not live on campus until my senior year because I couldn't afford to. I realized all the friends that I made were living off campus. So Boston College didn't have dormitories for juniors back then. Now they do, but back then they didn't. So a light bulb went off in my head because I said, okay, there's a captive audience here of however many thousand students that have to live off campus. And when I graduated, my uncle was into real estate here and there, a couple of rental properties. And I said, I want to buy a property. And I went and I borrowed money from wherever, and I bought a property right near Boston College, a 3-bedroom, 2,000 square foot condominium unit, which I rented out. And even back then, the rent was pretty high because it was the very limited supply, and it was close
to campus.
And people really loved it. And I bought a parking spot too, which I leased separately. So I made more income. So to me, that was my first actual risk taking, put everything you have on the line and say, you know what, I'm going to do it. And I did it. And
you caught the bug.
Yeah. I mean, I did well with that monthly. So if you think about it, my $19,200 job a year was giving me health insurance and some experience, but I was making probably 10 times more at the bar. Plus I was making my thing. So I quickly paid off my college loans. Helped out my mom and my brothers tremendously, and lived life. It wasn't like I was in a corner, but I was busy. I was always working, working.
Yeah.
And then I bought another one a couple of years later because I said, hey, if this one was working, maybe the across the street one is going to work. And then the across the street one cost twice as much. So it was interesting how the appreciation of these properties in that area was. So I'm like, wow, that's going up pretty high.
Yeah.
So I got a second one. And I was having equity and I was getting rental income. A little nerve-wracking because if you didn't get it rented in September, then you're kind of empty on it for a year because all the kids who were renting college already rented by previous February for the next year.
Yep.
So anyway, I tried to wiggle my way up that company I was working at. I spoke multiple languages, so that was kind of a lead person because there was a lot of their clients were a lot of little mom and pop shops from across the country. Someone spoke French, someone spoke Spanish, someone spoke Arabic, so I could relate to them. I'd be the guy who'd get on the phone. And then I remember this very clear. I went to the president's office one day, asked for a meeting, and I said, listen, I think I'm a valuable asset to your company because of X, Y, and Z. I think I can do a lot more than answer phone calls for you. I would love to get on a path to get more, to become more. And he's like, yeah, great. And then kind of nothing happened with that. And then my manager, the customer service manager, had gone to work at another company called ShopLink, which was an online grocery delivery company way before its time. in
Yeah, I was doing the
1990.
math in my head. I'm like, that's just really come onto the scene.
Yeah, but 1998, there
Oh,
was
wow.
couple of them that were doing it. So
Huh.
I took a leap and I said, I want to go work in a startup. And her thing was, the only job I can give you is a customer service role. I said, that's okay. I said, that's the best role I can have because I can learn about
Yeah.
what the problems are in the company. Because
Yeah.
happy customers are not calling every day. Unhappy customers are calling every day.
That's
And
right.
I can learn what the issues are and I can come up with solutions to help.
Not to mention just the skill set that you develop when you're constantly having to talk to people that are on the
Yeah,
offensive. Like
yeah,
my first job out of college was Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and they have a management trainee program. So you start at the bottom, you work your way
yeah,
up. But when you're that management trainee, man, you're just behind the counter all day renting cars to people. And unless you're at an airport where people are traveling,
yeah,
90% of the people coming in there are already pissed off because they're
yeah,
there because they got in a wreck, their car's in the
yeah,
shop, they've got to get a rental, they're running late. So sucks while you're doing it, but
yeah,
very valuable down the
100%.
road when you've kind of developed the
Yeah,
skill set of just having to constantly have those types of conversations.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, so I was there for maybe 3, 4 years because that was the whole .com boom, if you remember the .com
Yeah.
bubble in
Oh yeah.
2000. So,
So
but
did that company do well, or did they?
no, it did
No.
not do well. It kind of went out of business. But however, between me joining and it kind of blowing up, I wiggled my way into a pretty nifty business development role where I was responsible for going to 3 different locations in the country and setting up these massive distribution centers. And I had no formal experience in, you know, building something like that, but kind of figured it out, got this guy, the guy, I knew that I have to get the heads of these departments together and have to put a plan together. And I didn't use a Gantt chart or all these technology. I just had a piece of paper and saying, hey, by this date, this has to happen, because if this doesn't happen by this date, then
Yeah.
this won't happen. So
Apply a
anyway,
healthy dose of common sense and
yeah, learned a lot, tremendous learning for me. And then the company went out of business. I learned a little about venture money at that point too, because one day the CEO
yeah.
came and said, "Hey, I need you to make 3 deliveries to New York City to these." I'm like, "Okay, I'll come in the morning and I'll do them." So I got into a little thing. I dressed up. I went and did deliveries to these big time VCs who, if I name the name, you'll recognize it. And I basically walked into their office and I had to find a creative way
As like a
to get to them.
demonstration of how the
But I had to
service
get to them.
worked.
And the CEO said, make sure this individual sees how fresh the lobster is, and let him know. And I did that. I found my way into the office, and I basically told one of the assistants, I said, "This is you don't want his wife got this. You don't want him to see it. You know what I mean? Like you want me to leave the lobster here, and so his
Right.
guys are.
Yeah. You think he's going to be happy with you when his wife's.
Exactly, something
Yeah.
like that with my little broken English. But anyway, so I got in, and that day on the way back, the CEO called. He's like, "Hey, the guy just put in 10 million into our company," and I was like, excited, happy, And then the thing for me, the learning thing for me was when I got back, and he wanted to give me $1,000 bonus, and he was so excited. He brought me into his office. He's like, "Here's $1,000 bonus, like on your check for everything you're doing for the company." I said, "You know what?" I said, "I don't want $1,000 bonus." I said, "You can keep the $1,000 bonus." I said, "To me," I said, and which $1,000 was big money for me. I said, "To me, I'm bought into the company 100%. To me, what I want for my bonus is when you're starting to expand and use that $10 million to grow, when there's roles to be filled, I want you to think of
I'm your
me.
guy.
I'm your guy."
If you're listening to this podcast, then there's a good chance that you're looking to create more freedom in your own life. There's also a good chance that you realize that owning your own business can be a great way to take more control of your livelihood and create more of that freedom that we're all looking for. Also, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you realize that I specialize in franchise ownership. In addition to owning franchise businesses myself, I have a franchise consulting firm, Path to Freedom, where I help people navigate what is typically an overwhelming process of understanding franchising, identifying specific franchise companies that could be a fit, and then conducting the due diligence in a thorough and efficient manner with those franchise brands. My whole purpose here is to leverage my experience working for franchisors, owning franchises myself, and how we've been able to use that to create more freedom in our lives and help you determine if that could be a path that makes sense for you as well. So if any of this sounds interesting, if you've considered business ownership in the past, whether you've explored franchising specifically or not, I'd love to connect with you. I'd love to learn more about you and what it is that you're working towards in your life and determine if I may be in a position to help. A great starting point is the link below in the show notes, which will take you to a short form to fill out, and you'll receive a free copy of an ebook that I've put together, The 7 Steps to Freedom Through Franchise Ownership. That'll also get us connected, and I'd love to set up an introductory call where I can explain a little bit more about the process that I use to help people determine if franchise ownership could be a great way to start charting their own path to freedom. So click the link below in the show notes, receive the ebook, and let's get connected. I'd love to hear from you. Yeah.
And it worked. I mean,
hell yeah.
I'm sure that wasn't the perfect moment. It's like, hey, something in clicked and said, hey, I think we can use this kid to something else.
I mean, to me, that's had to have spoke volumes, to him. And, one thing I'll just interject here real quick, because, you mentioned when you got out of school, you felt lost. And
yeah,
the one thing that's interesting to me about, everything you've shared, you just got out there and you tried a lot of stuff. And
yeah.
like you said, you stayed busy, right? I think a lot of people, when they feel lost, like, oh, I thought I was going down this path, but that didn't work out, or I changed my mind, they just kind of sit on their hands and they wait for, like, the pathway to materialize in front of them. And, I think that's the best thing anyone can do. Because, I mean, look, how crazy is it to expect like an 18, 19-year-old kid to know what they want to do for the rest of their life?
Yeah. I envy those. I look at, like, I have kids now, and one of my sons says this is what he wants to do, and I'm like, I'm so proud of you or I'm so happy for you that you have a clear direction of where you want to go versus just this zigzag way. I'm very happy for you. I'm like, great. Then you put your head down and you go to that goal.
Yeah, absolutely. But if you don't have that like burning drive that's pushing you in one clear direction, go try a lot of different stuffs.
Yeah.
One, you're going to develop a good skill set in the process. Two, you're probably going to find a lot of stuff, you don't want to do for the rest of your life. And you're going to increase the likelihood that you do find something that really gets you excited, that you can, get fired up about. And that's when you do your best work, right? It doesn't matter what it is, but if it's something that you really enjoy and you're really excited about. And I think too many people, unfortunately, don't do that. And they spend, this huge chunk of their life doing something that they're miserable doing just to make enough money to pay the bills and, live a decent life. So anyways, I wanted to point that out. I can remember, kind of being in a similar position coming out of school, and like I graduated in 2009. So no companies were hiring. Right. And I just remember really, really being like stressing myself out, putting a lot of pressure on myself. What am I going to do? I should have this figured out. And it's like, looking back now, it's because like, no, you didn't need to have it figured out. But what I did do was go try some different things.
Yeah.
So
anyways. I mean, most of the kids in America now are in the shoes I was. They were lost. They don't know that many. I'm very happy that if my kid likes that path. But I want to go back to one of the points I made before. Is one of the reasons why I was like that is because of my upbringing, because of the situation that the way we grew up, if you folded, that's not good. If you fold your hands or whatever, then there's a lot at risk. So we just, this innately, we have this fighting, fighting ability in us. So not everyone, but most of us do, who grew up in that type of
Ones
environment.
that survived have that fight
Yeah,
in them.
because they have the fight gene that says, you know what, I'm going to go and I'm not going to give up. And to me, honestly, that's how I view a lot of it. To me, that's how I could get by, basically not having any money, not having no clear path to the future. But I knew I would outwork anybody around me. Like, I didn't have a doubt in my mind that anywhere I was, I know that I'm outworking them.
Yeah.
Like, that was like, you couldn't even, the mentality I had in my 20s, you couldn't even come close to it. That's how thing I was. Like, it didn't even get anybody around me is like, you're not even on my level. Even they may have been in higher positions and stuff, but I'm like, I'm gonna outwork you. I'm
That's
gonna be
a superpower.
Yeah. So I mean, at
When
the
you
bar,
know
right,
it,
I would work till 4 or 5 in the morning, clean the bathrooms, do everything. I was the manager, and everybody, I'd clean the bathroom, load stock, and then I'd be at work at 7 o'clock. And then I'd run to work, and then I'd go back at 3 in the afternoon, do it again, and go back. So that was that. I think that taught me a lot when I was younger. Anyway, but when I was after ShopLink, I did my stint with ShopLink. It went out of business. Couple more light bulbs went off in my head, and I said, okay, I kind of like this entrepreneurial company startup area because it's white space. I like building things. If you look at the path, right? Like the ophthalmology or whatever it was, it's building. My dad used to like to build things. I was always really good at putting things together. So on the side, I was doing a lot of real estate stuff, like helping my uncle with his rentals, bathrooms, kitchens, all that stuff. And I was very good at it. I'd never had any formal training, but I could put the pieces together very easily.
yeah.
So then I realized that I still like the professional environment. I'm like, I like the professional environment. I like the security for professional environment. Eventually, I wanted to do something on my own, but I don't think I was ready to make the leap. Financially, I wasn't ready. Plus, I didn't know what it was. So I said, I got to go to business school. I wanted to go to business school to actually round out my um, like my foundation had a lot of holes in it. I knew about finance, but I didn't know about finance. I knew about marketing. I didn't know about marketing.
Yeah, you got a taste of the venture capital and raising money, but just a
I didn't
glimpse of it.
understand how it all worked or how accounting and this. So I applied to business school and I went to Babson, which is the #1 entrepreneurial school in the country. I got in there and I did my 2-year straight MBA. And I came out of there. Right when I got out, I got married. I was recruited by the CIA, I believe, back then, if I remember correctly, because I spoke multiple languages.
That makes sense.
To go to Dubai to do different types of work for different companies. But
did you? I'm just curious. Was that interesting to you at all?
It was extremely interesting to me because I love stuff like that.
Yeah.
However,
CIA's never called me, man. God.
I mean, they were doing recruiting in our school because we had a lot of international students. And I put my name in and I got interviewed. But to me, I love that kind of stuff. But to me, my family was too important. My mom and my brothers, I couldn't leave. So to me, it's like, I'm not going to leave. And a couple of companies in Texas recruited me too, but I even had an offer, but I like an offer that blew my mind away, but I couldn't do it. I said, you know what, I'm going to stick around.
You wanted to stay there.
I wanted to stay around there, and I got a job at Capital One, pure analyst role, like, to me, very boring role, right? To me, very, very boring analyst role.
But it sounds like it kind of filled one of those gaps, right? That you hadn't really gotten through all the other jobs you'd had up to that point. And it was business school, I'm sure, helped with that, but then getting into this like hardcore data analyst, really looking at ROI and projections,
Correct.
now, I mean, how much
Yeah.
of that do you do as a business owner?
Yeah.
So I'm sure that was kind of
One of the best
helping
decisions I made. One of the best decisions I made in my career was to take that job at Capital One.
Yeah.
Because it taught me so. First of all, I met Jeff. Right. That's
Yeah.
that's the win right there. Number two, Capital One is an unbelievable company in my viewpoint, and the way they approach numbers, data, how to solve issues. It's, to me, it's mind-boggling, very impressive. So I learned a lot there. I worked there from 05, 04, September 04 to 2009, April 2009. Because and then there again, I wiggled my way into another entrepreneurial arm of Capital One, where we were doing home improvement financing for people like me, contractors who had customers.
Yep.
So like today's Enerbank would have been Capital One back then. And so we built a very, very big business for them. I think we almost did $1 billion in funded volume in 1 year. And Brett was a sales manager. You know Brett. He was the sales manager. It was Brett, myself, and Jeff were kind of in the team, leadership team there. And then they shut that business down because Capital One decided that, as much as money as that business was making, it wasn't even a dot on their big portfolio of businesses. Wow. And they just decided to
it's only $1 billion. We appreciate the effort, but not enough billions.
I think they were making about 10 to 12 million on that billion on the home improvement or whatever it was. But
sounds all right to me.
That education to me was about, listen, it's all about the value of the money. It's just you have one loan that loses, you have one loan that doesn't pay back, it wipes out so much profits.
A little bit of a house of cards.
2009, nobody was paying their loans back then. So and so that brings me up to like when Jeff and I kind of grouped after Capital One together and said, hey, there's a couple of things we liked at Capital One. We learned. One was, like the home improvement industry, loved in-home sales model, but not the pressure one, because most of them were high pressure. And we also thought that, hey, we could build a business. If there's a product and a service that makes sense, I think we can build a business around it. So we got together and we said, okay, we're gonna do this. And that was a leap for me, by the way, to kind of go out of the family, to decide to partner with someone. Partner with somebody completely foreign.
And Jeff doesn't even look a little bit Armenian, like not even a little bit.
No. I mean, Jeff's a Jewish background. I'm Armenian from Lebanon, so it's not.
I've never thought about that. That's interesting.
Yeah. It was an interesting dynamic and conversation, and on top of that, after the several things we got into, looked at, we were going to start a home improvement company. Like, just listen to this. I'm going to my wife and my wife of, how many years? 3-4 years. And my family, I'm gonna say, okay, guys, I have an idea. And oh, by the way, I had cut the roof off my house that weekend. I got laid off, so I have no roof, nowhere to live. So
you can't write that into a script, man.
I was like, okay, Salpi, I have an idea. I'm gonna take everything I have in my 401k, which is, for me, it was a lot back then, $100,000. I'm gonna put it in this company. In this home improvement company that's going to sell these shelves that slide in and out of kitchen cabinets. Literally. And I'm going to do it with a guy nobody knows.
I'm going to do it with my little Jewish buddy over here. And by the way, the name of the company is ShelfGenie.
So, I mean, I laugh at it now, and people laughed at me. Literally, like, you out of your mind. Literally out of you. You're going to sink everything you have. You don't even have a home. Your house is cut off. Literally, the roof is cut off that weekend.
You don't even have a roof over your head.
I'm not kidding you. That weekend, it was cut off. And then that Monday, we got laid off. So Anyway, so, but in all seriousness, if you approach it with data and really, if you look at it with the right lens, what we did was pretty damn smart, right?
And
Because
pretty calculated.
very calculated,
Because
very calculated.
Like I want to touch on a couple of things that you mentioned as you were telling that part of the story. One is that, it sounds to me like through you and Jeff's experience building this kind of arm of Capital One that specialized in home improvement financing, plus you would, I guess, at least dabbled in some of that through the real estate and stuff you were helping family members out with in real estate. You knew that was an attractive industry. So one, I want to have you explain what you and Jeff found attractive about that industry, and in particularly the in-home sales, but not like high pressure, scummy in-home sales tactics. But it also, I think you had also told me when you and I were talking about doing this that, you and Jeff had a pretty specific vision, to build an $8 to $10 million a year home improvement company. But you even knew at that time that it may not necessarily be through one product or service offering. It may be more of a portfolio, of home improvement companies, which is what you guys have gone on to do. So just expand a little bit on why that direction, and because I think it will drive home the point of why it wasn't as crazy of a move as it sounds like when you tell it like that.
Yeah. So we put a business plan together, and Jeff and I said that we want to build a $8 to $10 million home improvement company made up of multiple verticals. And the multiple verticals make sense to us. It wasn't foreign language because we came from Capital One, and Capital One was diversified, right?
Yeah, sure.
They went from one vertical. Once they nailed that, they went to another vertical. Like they had healthcare finance, they had home improvement finance, we were going to go into wedding finance, so we were going to go down the line. So to us, it wasn't foreign to do anything like that. Number two, we looked at a couple opportunities. One was flooring, one was water bubbler that did coffee and things like that. Both franchises, and I'll talk about franchises in a second. But what the math we did was, if we loved the product, if the product talked to us and made sense, or the service and the numbers made sense, then we can build it. Because one thing we learned at Capital One was all the successful home improvement companies that we met throughout our venture and trying to get them to sign up with us had one common theme in them. And you ask Brett, he'll say the same thing. We are a sales and marketing company that happens to be doing X, Y, and Z. Yeah. And if you believe that, and if you ingrain that in your head, then the problem becomes a numbers game, right? It's a very formulaic numbers game. Yeah, of course you have to deliver on the product, deliver on the service.
Well, and have a good product to sell for it to be sustainable.
100%. Good product, good service. That's a given.
Yeah.
But the front end of the business in all these businesses, without the sales, none of it doesn't matter. You can make the most beautiful closet, the best sliding shelf, the most beautiful, but if you can't get the person to buy it, I don't think it's gonna be. You're gonna have a very nice warehouse full of those
dusty shelves that are not getting used by anyone. It's so true.
So that was interesting to us. And then the home improvement was interesting because I personally had a affinity to home. I had my home improvement contractor's license. I was a licensed contractor in Massachusetts because of the stuff that I was doing on the side to make ends meet and do whatever I was doing. So when we walked into ShelfGenie and I saw the product, I was like, wow. I go, it's pretty straightforward, right? Like I go, it's not that
different.
hard.
I mean, there's even to this day, there's not, in terms of companies out there that's their specialty, that's their core product offering. There isn't much out there, but it's the type of thing, man, when people see it, like, we've all been at home shows where we've got our displays with shelf. you can just see the light bulb go off over people. They're like,
Correct. Yeah.
I didn't know that's what I needed, but I've known I needed that for a long time.
Yeah.
I just didn't know it was that.
The business model too, if you think about ShelfGenie's business model, right? You don't have to have a building. You don't have to have overhead. Like if you think about all that.
Yeah. That's why I asked, about the in-home sales component, right? And if that was part of the thought process, knowing that's something that you wanted, because it keeps you from needing the retail storefront, which saves a lot of upfront capital, saves 100%. A lot of overhead.
So that was very, very appealing to us, and it made sense on paper. It made sense conceptually. It made sense, and if you think of what was going on back then, recession, crash in home improvement, it weeded out a lot of mom and pops that couldn't make it, right? Aging population in Massachusetts, older homes, stay in place, aging in place. So it made a sense, and the ticket size was $2,500 to $3,000 average back then. It's a credit card swipe to change the way you use your kitchen every day, change your life.
Yeah, for something you literally touch multiple times a day, every day.
And if you do it right, if you sell it right, if you design it right, then it's going to be pretty quick. And that's what happened. We got into it, boom, 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 and we grew very quickly. And we became, we hit $1 million our third year or something like that. It was pretty big for us, and our focus was on that.
Yeah.
And we ended up, I decided, pushing Jeff, I said, I want to start running it a little different than what ShelfGenie says to run it, because I want to control. I wanted to hire the installers, put them on our payroll, because Massachusetts was very, very tough on W-2 versus 1099.
Right. So the typical model is everyone's a subcontractor, commission only type of thing. Yeah.
But knowing that we were going to get into other businesses, we knew that we were going to have a building, right? We're going to have a location. We can have people come. I can have everybody look the same, feel the same. I can have my trucks all lettered. So versus putting magnets on their trucks. So it kind of worked. And then as we got into the second business, the third business, and we bought the location, or we got our location, it kind of all gelled together.